Let's start with some basics. When we say narcissism, when we talk about narcissistic personality disorder, what is it that we're talking about? Because that term seems to be going through a little bit of a meaning drift. When I'm talking about narcissism, if I say this is narcissism or the person has narcissism, I mean they have narcissistic personality disorder, because I think that's significantly different to saying trait narcissism, which does exist on a spectrum. But there's no reason that I've seen, there's nothing in the published literature that leads me to believe that people who are very high in trait narcissism can't be touched and changed by therapy, or couldn't be touched and changed by communication. They can take critical feedback, they can internalize it, and they can adapt to it. But when I'm talking about narcissistic personality disorder, the way I use the term narcissism, I'm talking about somebody who's had a psychotic break from reality and has made a choice in childhood to simply disengage from reality as it is, and to live instead inside of a fortress of delusion, to keep reality at bay. It's a defensive personality disorder, probably in response to a childhood environment that was too traumatic for the child to deal with. And so the coping mechanism they chose is delusion, is fantasy. Once they grow up into adulthood, because they're keeping this infantile defense from childhood, it means that they are intrinsically naive, they're naive, they're impressionable, they're easily brainwashed, easily duped, and have by definition a utopian view of reality. As cynical as they may appear to be in their false self, as utilitarian or as realistic, they are fundamentally utopian, to the extent that they think that fantasy and a fantasy world will be their salvation. This is an important distinction, I think. So then you have an adult who's running a program that says delusion is safety, reality is danger, delusion is salvation, reality is doom. In other words, if you want to use psychological terminology, they're in a perpetual state of self-inflicted dissociation, because they're dissociating from reality. They're not interested in reality as it is. And they must be, therefore, diagnostically, somewhere on the spectrum for a psychotic spectrum disorder. So they're dissociative and they're psychotic. So when you start with that definition and you say, okay, what does narcissism then from those coordinates entail? It entails an investment in unmooring from reality. Let's say, roughly speaking, a civilization's capacity to survive and thrive off into a fruitful future is essentially tied, is critically tied to its ability to process and mitigate threat. Threat could come from the inside of the civilization or from the outside of the civilization. But the threat is a reality. If the civilization becomes narcissistic and it becomes heavily invested in fantasy as a means of safety, in entertainment as a means of dissociation, in propaganda as a means of psychosis, self-soothing through grandiose fantasies about who you are and what your life is really about, then it's unmoored from a critical feature of civilization. Would you agree? Let me know in the comments. A civilization can't thrive if it's become narcissistic. A civilization can have narcissists. A civilization could even be run, at least nominally, at least by appearance, by highly narcissistic people, and usually is. As long as they only have their hands on certain levers of power, and the people who really have the power slap their hands away from the other levers of power that the good puppets are not supposed to touch. So I'm not saying a civilization can't have narcissistic personalities, and I'm not saying a civilization can't have narcissistic personalities in positions of power. I'm saying a civilization cannot survive when it itself has become so narcissistic, based on the coordinates I just gave you, an investment in fantasy, a desire to run from reality, a sort of felt sense that reality itself is an opponent to be defied, to be fled from, to hide from, and an immersion in fantasy being a superior way of living life, then that civilization, I would claim, would be doomed to collapse. As above, so below, as within, so without. Same thing in a relationship, in a nation, a civilization, a family unit, a relationship. When one or both parties are narcissistically invested in fantasy over reality, way beyond reality, to the point where reality is an enemy to be opposed, then that project, that civilization, that relationship, that endeavor, that corporation must be doomed to fail. Nothing in our reality survives long-term and thrives long-term through the denial of data. This is why most civilizations, in fact, all civilizations, will have had their roots in a pretty broad scale acceptance that hard data is more important than subjective experience or subjective feelings. That's not the same statement as subjective feelings or subjective perception has no meaning. Indeed, most civilizations grasp the need for both. They just don't put one as a higher order in the hierarchy than the other. So I would say two things have happened to us. We've lost our respect for deliberate conscious engagement in fantasy, deliberate conscious engagement in play, in creativity. We don't seem to value that very much anymore. We've definitely lost our appreciation for spirituality, for an appreciation for the mystical experience, for the unexplained experience, for the discrete ability for a person to believe in some kind of religion. And there aren't many religions that don't have some mystic or mythical elements to them. I guess you could argue that certain schools of Buddhism maybe are pretty scrubbed clean of that kind of thing, but they still require, at the end of it all, a degree of faith. Even if the faith is only, I believe, if I follow, let's say, Buddhism, very scrubbed schools of Buddhism, the Noble Eightfold Path of right thought, word, deed, intention, meditation, life, and so on and so forth, that my life will be better. So we've lost two things. We've lost our capacity, I'm claiming, because of broad scale narcissism, like the civilization, the culture itself has become narcissistic, to process reality and to deal with threats proportionately and sensibly in an adult way, and just go, well, these are our internal threats. We must deal with them. These are our external threats. We must deal with them. We've lost that, and simultaneously lost the appreciation for play's sake, for the subjective experience, for the mystical experience, for, I don't know, poetry, meditation, or in the face of nature, becoming closer to God, or even just believing that there is something beyond the material world. We've gotten the bad end of the stick, both ends. We've got both ends of this stick are bad, and this is the only stick we have. No God, no mystery, no mystical experience, and no capacity to, in an adult way, process reality as it is. And you could even argue the reason why we've become so delusional, you could argue, I don't know whether I would, but I'd be open to having somebody construct the argument, that our incapacity to process reality, because we're so obsessed with the narcissistic fantasy that protects us from reality, we deliberately now, broad scale, in every area of our civilization, go out of our way to unmoor symbols to actual meaning. We want to be unmoored from meaning. We want to be unmoored from objective reality. We want words that used to point at something, they were a symbol that pointed to a thing, to now be able to point to a different thing. Or they want people to have a personal lexicon, a personal vocabulary. And that's as valid as anybody's vocabulary. So then everybody gets to say the word chair means whatever I want it to mean. Yes, I know that you're using it as like an instrument for sitting on, but I want to be able to use it to mean airplane. And you might say, well, nobody's saying that. And I would say, open your eyes. Yes, they are. And they're heavily, heavily invested in that. So we've got an inability to process real threat, an unwillingness to face reality as it is, that could be caused, I wouldn't argue, but somebody could, and I would listen to them, by a shunning of actual mystical experience, by a shunning of accepting that part of being human forever was our myths, was our dream state, and knowing, or at least respecting, that that mystical experience, that meditative state, that dreamlike state, whilst it's not real reality in the sense of material reality, it was powerful, meaningful, and should be respected. Now, you've got to think about this. In other civilizations and other cultures, the very notion of receiving visions or being able to channel messages from other entities through sleep, meditation, fasting, whatever it was, were actually the cornerstones of their civilization. And they held that at the same time as being, this is what we're doing on the one hand, the yin yang balancing principle. In the yin state, we're accepting that this is very important. As adults, our capacity to play, our capacity to write poetry, to make art, to make music, this is beautiful, this is essential, this is human, this is wonderful. We need to keep this, we need to preserve it. And the yang side, we must be able to say a chair is a chair. When we've lost the ability to say that chair is a chair, well, that one wants to identify it as not a chair. That one can do whatever it wants. But we collectively have to protect collective meaning so that we can process threats. And when we all become narcissistic, we all become dissociative. We use dissociation as a way of coping with reality. Reality is hard. I'm not saying it isn't. And we use fantasy, but instead of having it in a discrete space over here, we've now brought the fantasy from the private space into the public space. When I'm saying fantasy here, I'm using it like in the psychoanalytic term, the not real, the blue pill. We're using everybody blue pills, and that's fine. It's totally normal to blue pill parts of your life. In fact, if you didn't, you would go psychotic. And I think this is what's happening. We're going psychotic. If you only had rigorous, rugged realism, cynicism, utilitarianism, the purely extreme end of yang, everybody would get sick and become psychotic. If you only have subjective experience, mysticism, unconscious, poetry, and nothing else, everybody similarly becomes psychotic. Humans need to breathe in and breathe out. We are creatures of night and day. We have rhythms. The tide comes in, the tide goes out. You need both. We need balance. And a civilization that's become narcissistic is imbalanced. Narcissism, by definition, is a personality disorder. So it's maladaptive, meaning, well, mal means bad. It's poorly adapted to its environment. What does it mean if it's maladaptive? It means if it's a person, the person will suffer and probably self-destruct. That's because it's a personality disorder instead of a personality, I don't know, order, an example of an ordered personality. It's a personality disorder. Similarly with the civilization, on moors, and it must come off the tracks. It has to eventually. Why am I raising this now? Because I think, in all honesty, you know, it's been getting to me a little bit, as I'm sure it's been getting to everybody who is alive today, who has eyes and ears and a brain that functions. It's almost, watching things play out globally, it's almost like watching sleepwalkers fight with entities in their dreams. You know, what's a good metaphor? Let's imagine that the leaders of the world, the people who move and shake and make things happen, they're all in an asylum, an old asylum, the old-fashioned ones, and they're all in their nightgowns, and they're all thorazined up, but they're poorly dosed, so they're half awake, half asleep. And they're all fighting their individual demons that are purely projections and purely fantastical. But if you look out across the asylum floor, where these 20 madmen are ranting and raving, they occasionally actually don't just bump into the fantasy, they bump into each other. When they bump into each other, when one arm strikes another, that gets internalized into the dream. You know, like in a dream when your alarm clock goes off and then your brain is like, just adapt it into the dream, man. Don't wake up. Just fold the alarm into the dream. There's somebody knocking on the door. So your brain's like, just fold the knocking on the door into the dream. Yeah, let's dream about a door knocking. Yeah, man. Let's just, it's like freestyle jazz. And your brain's just like, yeah, man, just bring it in. Yeah, let's just flow with that groove. And you're like, no, I think I really need to wake up. So they just fold it into the dream. And it's a little bit, it's exasperating and it's saddening to see, because I can't see any adults here. I see a lot of infants, and I see a lot of people half asleep. I see a lot of people dreaming dreams, and they might be dreaming a dream that's 200 years old. They might be dreaming a dream that's thousands of years old. They're not even dreaming their own dreams. They're not even living their own nightmares. They're living somebody else's nightmare. For what? Why? Where are the adults? Where's the sense? Where's I'm going to say something very arcane that people will probably laugh at me for. Shh, tell no one I said this. Where's the honor? Ew, that's a dirty word, isn't it? Where's the honor in all this? I sat there watching this going, aren't you ashamed? Aren't you ashamed? Do we need to bring back religion? Is that what, like, we can't bring it back. You can't put the toothpaste back into the tube. But sometimes I could do 2 hours on the horrors of religion. But you have to account for the fact that, like, when people believed that they were spiritual beings having a human experience, rather than just machines of flesh and blood randomly put on a rock for reasons, nobody knows why, you're born, you live, you take some pleasures, you take some power, do the best you can, and then fucking die in the biggest mansion you possibly can. There's a different attitude. These people don't believe in anything. They don't believe in anything. They're completely nihilistic. And in their nihilism, in their postmodern materialism, they're not very honorable. They're not very principled. They're not principled. These are not people of principle. Nobody's taken a hit. Nobody's taken a sacrifice. Nobody's putting their ego to one side and just going, okay, in the name of what's right, in the name of humanity, in the name of whatever, despite all the pressure I have to do this, I'm not doing it. I'm just not doing it. It's gone. Who was the last politician who did that? I don't know. Anyway, that's my talk. It's 20 minutes and 14 seconds long on how narcissism, narcissistic delusion can lead to civilizational collapse. Now I will take your questions. If you could make them understandable to Homo sapiens of moderate intelligence, that would be very appreciated. I have to blow my nose. I'll be back in 1 second. Do you agree that the invention of the dishwasher ended civilization? Goodness me. Who knows? So people will often say to me, oh, that's all very well and good. What solutions do you have? And I've been thinking about it for a couple of years, and I think I'm probably in the camp that would say, look, sadly, we're not evolved and adapted for the technological advancements that we've made. And I don't know if you guys ever read the Dune series that was then continued by Frank Herbert's son, but they had something called the Butlerian Jihad. There was a jihad waged in the Dune world where they wiped out all AI, and AI became completely banned because of the problems that it brought with it. And I do wonder if it would be like a cult. Like you're gonna end up with breakaway cults that just go, right, we're not doing this anymore. We're gonna go and live in our own communities. But technology will be treated as like, I don't know, a necessary evil. We'll use it to reduce pain. We'll use it for medical reasons, but in every other sense, it needs to be reduced because we just don't seem to be able to cope with it. I wouldn't blame the dishwasher. I mean, I used one today. I'm just right there, and I'm very glad it works. How about, Scorpion says, how about helping the kids before they become the evil narcissist? I think if a child has one sane parent, it's usually enough that's there. One good enough parent, it's usually enough. Papa says, why be honorable when all you value is money and items and treating other people as objects? True. Is politics not a religion? No. Politics doesn't require faith. Politics isn't trying to answer unanswerable questions. So the difference between that politics and religion, or say spirituality, is it's trying to come up with answers that, well, nobody really can answer. There are some political movements that end up with religious overtones, and some political movements you could say kind of were both. They were a political movement and religion. You could argue that. Faith in who or in what? How does this end? Oh, it's ended and begun many, many times. Is politics not religion? No, not quite. Sometimes. So if you have any questions, feel free to write them here. Do all narcissists have dismissive, avoidant attachment styles? I don't know much about attachment styles. It's not really my thing. I would have thought dismissive, avoidant would be correct. Insecure attachment styles, such as fearful, preoccupied, or dismissive, as you said. Insecure attachment styles can stem from early relationships with caregivers. People with vulnerable narcissistic traits tend to have higher levels of attachment anxiety, while people with grandiose narcissistic traits tend to have lower levels of avoidant attachments. Narcissists may have an avoidant or anxious attachment style, or a combination of the two. So there we go. How's that for optimism? Well, what good does optimism do? Like, if we're literally tied to the tracks and everybody's going, don't worry, no train's going to come. We can just stay here forever. Just lie still. Maybe you need a pessimist to be like, hey, try to wriggle free or roll off the track before the train comes. Oh, we loved our optimism. Squashed, dead. So are you afraid of us walking away from religion? Oh, no. No. Who's us here? No, not at all. That's done. Everybody's walked away from religion. We're just not. Civilization is just fundamentally not religious. So if you were a religious person living in this civilization, it really doesn't do anything. The civilization isn't religious. So it's more like, this is old news. This is from the 1800s. Dostoevsky and Nietzsche wrote about it in Nietzsche and Beyond Good and Evil. God is dead. We have killed him. What festivals, what sacrifices will we have to make to wash the blood from our hands? The lament. And then in the Brothers Karamazov, Dostoevsky clearly said that we're moving into, by unmooring ourselves from having God at the center of life as a civilization. Like, I'm not a particularly religious person myself, but I understand that. So yeah, so that would have meant that it would have started in the 1850s if you've got like philosophers and authors writing about it in 1880. There was plenty of people who saw it coming. It's already gone. It's not a religious civilization. It's not a faith-based civilization. It's just not part of our operational coordinates. So you can be religious, but you're not impacting mainstream culture. Will you cook Japanese ramen for me? I wouldn't even cook them for myself. What would I be doing with all those useless carbs? Do they build muscle? No. Was Arnold Schwarzenegger built on ramen? No. So why eat them? I'm not a big fan of ramen. Are you a fan of Teal Swan? I don't really know much about Teal Swan, so I couldn't be a fan, but that's because I don't know much. Zena says, very interesting, Richard. Thank you. You're very welcome. Narcissists fluctuate between dismissive and obsessive. I didn't even know obsessive was an attachment style. Thank you for that. Disorganized attachment is pretty accurate. I've been living with 2 narcissists for a couple of years. Money is the only real religion because everyone has to engage with it. I agree. In this world, the biggest religion is now money. Nietzsche and optimism. Yes. Yes. Nietzsche had some solutions for us. Hi, Richard. Do you have any thoughts? Oh, I don't know him. I'm so sorry. No, I don't have any thoughts. I don't know this person. I should read more, for sure. Why are narcissists superficial, evil intellectuals? They're not all, not everybody with MPD is an intellectual. Is it a chemical imbalance in their brain? There could be a genetic component to narcissism. There could be an injury, a brain injury component to narcissism. I don't think it's usually considered a chemical imbalance in the brain. I'm not sure that there's many disorders and mental health issues that there's any that are just considered a chemical imbalance in the brain. The chemical imbalance in the brain hypothesis, I think, has been pretty well disproven. So the idea was, oh, the person's depressed because they're not producing enough serotonin, for example. And they found that just that's not the case. And sometimes there's this logical fallacy where we confuse correlation with causation, cum hoc ergo propter hoc, with this, therefore, because of this. So do people with mental health issues have brain imbalances? Sure. But do they have mental health issues because they have brain imbalances, or do they have brain imbalances because they have mental health issues? And the answer seems to be both. Isn't it more the lack of love and guidance from parents? That's usually where I lean for narcissism. I think it's probably got more to do with nurture than nature. I think it's trauma based. Psychopathy, there seems to be some pretty good evidence that a significant portion of psychopathy is genetic. Is NPD full identification with the false self? No, I don't think it's full. This is conjecture. This is not based on published literature or anything. This is my conjecture. I think so. You have the narcissist who's trying to play off the false self. They're trying to pull off the false self. They're trying to be the false self, but they know they're not quite doing it. They know they're not quite there. And so you're a sacrifice to the false self. Everyone else is a sacrifice to the false self. But then sometimes they're also a sacrifice to the false self. So I don't think they're fully identified with it. I think if they were, they are more identified. When they're more identified with it, it's because a narcissistic supply is fulsome. It's easy to get, and there's just loads of it. And so their fantasy is upheld. It's validated by external reality, which is why it's dangerous to validate mental health issues. It makes a mentally ill person even more mentally ill. You're supporting their delusion. That's not good. So then they have more narcissistic supply, more validation, let's say, and they become more grandiose. And then they typically would become more extroverted and potentially more daring. But I don't know if there's ever full identification with the false self, but it's a good question. Talk about the link between PCOS in women and childhood trauma. Well, just talk about it. Hey, I don't know about everything. I've had a couple of girlfriends with PCOS, but I'm not educated on the subject. I really couldn't talk about it. I'm so sorry. Why cannot a narcissist self-recognize? They can. They can. We know this because of the single inventory narcissism score work. It's called Single Inventory Narcissism Score. You can look it up, SINS, and it's from the University of Michigan or Minnesota, but I think Michigan was where the research was done back in 2015. No, we know most people with NPD, if you describe NPD to them, they would be like, yeah, that's me. They do self-recognize. They might not admit it to you, but they know full well themselves. Narcissus gives himself entirely to the pool. A clarification there. This is from my friend, Dr. Paul Taylor. Narcissus is giving himself to the image of himself in the pool. This is the thing that he wants us all to remember. He's giving himself to his image of himself. Could psychopathy be a psych wounding, a vampire bite on the energy level? I don't know what that means. A psych wounding on the energy level. I mean, it's not like I can't make up a meaning for what you're saying. I absolutely could, but I could come up with something that's different to what you're saying to me. So because I don't know exactly what it is you're saying, I don't want to answer that question. Because if I just go, yeah, it's a psychic wounding on the energy level, you'd be like, oh, cool. But I don't know what that means to you. As it happens, I don't think it is that. I think it's a combination of trauma and genetics. It's the genes are primed for that more so than in other people, and then certain types of trauma causes that expression. Why do they leave partners if they can supply from other things? Well, they would leave partners because they can get supply from other places and other things. If being with the partner is not giving them the narcissistic supply, the attention, the validation that they were getting before, then yes, they would leave them for another person who will offer them the attention and validation that they so deeply crave. Sorry, I must switch off my camera. I will be back in 1 second. Why have psychopaths thrived through evolution, and how can this change? Well, it's a good question, and everybody should consider it. Why have narcissists thrived throughout evolution? So, in what way is being a psychopath adaptive, and in what environments is being a psychopath adaptive? And what do we mean when we say somebody's acting like a psychopath? Do you think it's possible that if we're diagnosing via external observable traits, which we are, that's not my fault. That's the face of modern psychiatry and modern psychotherapy. Think about being in a war zone. How long of your country being under sustained attack do you think it would be? And if you saw your family killed and then you decided to join the resistance movement and you engaged in guerrilla warfare, living knowing that if you were captured, you would be tortured and then summarily executed, how much of that do you think you would go through before a psychotherapist from a warm, comfortable, well-fed, well-sheltered, dry office somewhere could observe you and say, this person's a psychopath? Do you think it would be hours, days, weeks, or months before you would develop psychopathic traits? To me, I think that survival mode is the essence of psychopathy. If you've ever experienced life-threatening real-world violence, your response and adaptation to that becomes quite psychopathic, quite psychopathic by our standards, quite quickly. It would be adaptive, possibly, and better to be psychopathic in a environment where life is cheap and survival is hard, and you can die a violent death very, very suddenly. And you know this is true because you've looked around and seen other members of your tribe, other members of your family and friend group die violently very quickly. Then you would become psychopathic, I claim, and that's could be argued to be a natural response. Well adapted to a war zone, not well adapted to civilized life. We don't know what to do with these people. Can future medicine cure narcissism with brain chips and surgery? Who knows what future medicine will be able to do? I mean, if we don't have a civilization resetting global war, and I sincerely hope that we don't, and we learn to control our greed and to develop artificial intelligence in a sensible and restricted way, and maybe just apply it only to the fields like medicine and anything that basically just directly reduces human suffering. And that doesn't include bigger yachts. I mean, like, if a human being is in pain or dying young of some particularly aggressive form of cancer, who knows what would be possible? There's a possibility that in, I don't know, 50 years into the future, we wouldn't call what we now call today narcissism. We would consider it something else completely, because the entire context and culture would shift. I think good quality meditation practice could alleviate narcissism, says Sugar Free. Sword Psychology says another world war is inevitable. What do you think? Well, I don't think it makes anybody Nostradamus or particularly clever to say a world war is coming. The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So yeah, I mean, these things come around in cycles. Then there'll be peace, and then shift forward in the timelines of the future. Then there will be war. Then there'll be peace, and then move forward into the future. Then there'll be war, and that's plus ça change, plus ça c'est la même chose. Regarding honor, how do I, as a stoic, faith-orientated woman, face this world who wants honorable people but shits on them? Do you shit on them? You must not to make a shit. Gina, why are you make a shit? I tell you, Gina, don't make a shit on people. It is not nice. I want you to make a stop. Oh, the world shits on them when we are doing our best to be good role models. I'm trying to be a role model, and the world, you know what the world do? The world did take a shit on my head, and I am wear it like a hat. What should we do as good, stoic, faith-oriented women? Let's learn Chinese. The Chinese expression for the day is 我不知道. 我不知道. It means I don't know in Mandarin. Say it with me. 我不知道. 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 In Cantonese, it's ngo is war, and then bu is and jitao is zido. Ngo mzito. Ngo mzito. I don't know how to answer your question, Gina. What can you do? You could spin around in a field full of poppies in the wind, in a dress. I think you're doing the right thing in your profile picture, Gina. I think you're doing the right thing. You're like a lady in a commercial for washing up. I am Gina. I'm in a field. I think you're doing the right thing. Dance like you're in The Sound of Music through a poppy field. You're asking a question, but you already found the answer that we all needed. And it's right there. It's right there. Live, love, and laugh in defiance of the evil. I don't know. I don't know how to answer this. If you're in an individual singular path and the culture's moving in a direction, you know, you have like these shitty coaches and gurus who'd be like, oh, you just need to do this, you just need to do that. It's like, that's cool, but the culture's not doing that. How is that a solution? Let's just live as some weird, you know, wandering role, like what do they call them? What do the kids call it? Is it like a Sigma? Is the Sigma wolf the one who goes off on his own? I'm like, yeah, good. Go be schizoid then. Great. Then get back to us in a couple of weeks' time. Like, I'm really sad and I can't cope. Yeah, because you're spending too much time on your own. Isolation. It's not good for you, kids. It's not good for you. But running through fields of poppies and dancing, good for you. Well, that's what listen. That's why you tune in, for wisdom and guidance. You can make a culture, though, and over time, the wider culture will change. How can one individual make a culture? We call those, you see the word cult? It comes from the word culture. So if you go off with 40 people, you done got yourself a cult. You ain't got a culture, you got a cult. Is there no hope for a narcissistic person changing? If they have narcissistic personality disorder, then no. If they're just high in trait narcissism, then yes. If you're stuck in a cycle with somebody where you're hoping they're going to change and they say they will change and then they don't, you should absolve yourself of the responsibility of holding the burden of their childhood trauma for them and go on and live your life if you've been through that cycle like a few times with them. Lucas says, your advice has finally pushed me towards help I need for traumas that usually lead to MPD. Often, however, I am identifying as a victim of such abuse from my last relationship. But I'm so confused but hopeful. I'm glad. Everybody should consider professional help. And seeing a qualified therapist. I have courses. We have Unplugged from the Matrix of Narcissistic Abuse, which is a very good course for pulling apart the narcissistic fantasy, which is what continues after a narcissistic relationship has ended. We also have the new course, Narcissistic Matrix Reintegration. So the narcissistic abuse splinters the personality. If you want to reintegrate them and bring those splintered parts together, that's a good course for that. But these are just courses. It's never going to compare. It's never going to compare to sitting down with a good professional, even if it's just over Zoom or Skype. I recommend doing it and getting into a dialogue with somebody who you trust and have good rapport with. Cultivating a cult, an agriculture of cults. We're going to make ourselves a cult. Come on, old Uncle Quigley. Get down from there. It's time to make a cult. We're going to make ourselves a cult. It's too late. We are already there. Are you writing any books on the subject? Oh, I should write all the books. No, I might do. Is there good cults, plural? Well, you know, I work with my friend Mark Vicente, who was in The Vow about his escape from the Nixium cult run by Mark Ranieri. And he says nobody joins a cult. Everybody thinks they're joining a good project. But, you know, when does it become a cult? And then there's lists made by cult psychologists and cult deprogramming experts that would be like, these are the 10 things to watch out for that makes a cult a cult. It's interesting. It's a super interesting subject because we have like mini cults within our civilization. So somebody said before, politics is a religion, and you know, really, our politics of today is less a religion and more of a cult. What you're saying is cult-like elements. No, I can't, but I'm pretty sure that there's. So you know when you have stuff that is like central nervous system based. And I am a hippie. Like in many ways, I'm super hippie on a lot of things. But what I'm going to say is going to sound hippie-ish, but I don't mean it in the hippie way. It is well worth looking at what long-term, because CPTSD means it's long-term and you couldn't escape it, trauma can do to the body's mechanisms of, so IBS, that's your capacity to process energy. That's your capacity to process food. There's a whole host of, God, what do they call it? Is it immune system related diseases as well? Trauma and stress, that's not a hippie statement, can make people sick. And we should all be more open to it. Your general practitioners, your doctors, generally speaking, don't have time to read all the literature. But we have the internet. We have Google Scholar. You can go on Google Scholar and put in CPTSD and IBS. Or you could just, if you don't want to read research papers, which I appreciate not everybody does, you can just put it in, and you can find like reputable websites that aren't like trying to sell you craziness. But you have to exercise discernment, and you can find good articles out there about it for sure. What the hell's a hippie statement? We don't just live in this world. There are many worlds. And we have selves that live in all of them simultaneously. You have a purpose here. What you do counts. but it's not clear. But that's the point, that it's not clear. So then you have to open your eyes to see clearly what the point is. It's not given to you. You have to find it. That's a hippie statement. Jung or Freud? Adler. Hey, how's that for a contrarian answer? You missed out the third man in the trilogy. Adler. If I wanted to do therapy with people and get them back on the horse and get them back into life, Adler. Easily Adler. But do like some Freudian concepts. I don't want to give them up. I do like a little bit Jung. A little bit Jung. Sprinkle it in, baby. You know? Animus possession, anima possession. Some archetypal stuff, becoming possessed by repressed elements of the unconscious, like a kind of possession by the unconscious. Pretty good. You're not gonna do any Freud, you know? You're not gonna do any id, ego, super ego. You're not gonna do any introjects. You're not gonna do defenses. Everybody's like, oh, I hate Freud, and then they go through like standard issue psychological defenses, a lot like the list that we all know, so, like projection and sublimation. Freud gave us those. I mean, he said some weird stuff, but he was a smart mensch. UG Rose is here to moderate, to guide, and to protect the chat. She's like an avenging angel. So we say thank you, UG Rose. Thank you for moderating. I will now go to the next question, which I will recognize by the question mark. Here's the question mark from somebody with a Balkan name, Jan Sefran. Nikola Tesla? Ah, yes, Nikola Tesla, the famous Croatian. Lol. I'm just trolling you. I know he's not Croatian. He's Bosnian. Lol. He's not Bosnian or Croatian. He's American. Listen, don't let me provoke you. Don't let me provoke you. Just eat a cevapi, drink some rakia, play some tsetsa, have a little dance. I'm only messing. Chef Fran. Oh, you're right. That's what that. Look, there's another person with a little hat on something. I know how to do this one because of Zizek. This is Jules. But then you put an L by a J. Like, what is it with you people and consonants? No wonder you always fight him. Probably fighting over consonant placement. Julie. Auntie is okay. Auntie, Julia. But yeah, you're right. The dude is probably not Safran. He's probably Chefran, right? Chefran. Listen, you're learning all sorts. You've learned Chinese. Now you're going to learn how to do former Yugoslavian country names. I am a priest candidate, no less. Good Lord. Haha, that was a Freudian slip. I didn't mean to say good Lord. And our rector is a big narcissist. He does all the stuff you talk about. All are scared of him because he kicks out people who displease him. Your God is a jealous God. How do I proceed and act with him? Oh my goodness. Well, you don't want to get kicked out. So you have to handle him. You have to handle him. And you have to know, look, you're probably a person who's high in conscientiousness, and you probably have a fairly well developed moral code, and you've chosen to be a priest, which is good because there's not enough priests. You know, in Ireland, when I was living in Ireland in 2018, they said they had one new candidate for the priesthood, and the year before, 0. So good. What was I going to say to you? Oh, yes. So here's a piece of dogma, narcissistic dogma that I play, that I hold to inside my head. Abandon sincere communication when communicating with the insincere. You're a priest candidate, you're probably high in conscientiousness, you have a fairly well-developed moral philosophy, and you probably value truth-telling. But when you are dealing with somebody who has embraced insincerity and evil doing as a way of life, you don't owe that person honesty, authenticity, openness, and clarity. You don't owe him that. And it would be a mistake, nay, a sin, for you to approach him naively and openly. Handle him, because you know what is right. So he may be higher than you in the church by credentials, but your moral philosophy is higher than his, and your clarity is higher than his. So you don't owe him any sincerity. You don't owe him openness and honesty. The guy is confused. It is Shaitan who has confused him, and you just handle him and try and keep cohesion and protect people from him whilst he's possessed by the Dark One. Could you, in the comments, just let me know, is it, write it out phonetically like I'm dumb. Is it Julieu? Like, is it je, ul, ye? Do we say the ye on the end? Julieu, 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 Julieu? Please. Julieu. Why are you smoking? Isn't that bad for you? Yes. Everything is bad for me. I'm not supposed to be here. I'm on the wrong planet. Your planet sucks. And vapes, meanwhile, God, it's terrible, you know? Just hands out free information and vapes. God, it's almost like I just drowned a bag full of 5 kittens. There goes kitten number 6. That was a fun button push. I was just trying to make people angry. You're talking about the Nikola Tesla thing? Yeah. Yeah. That fine, upstanding American. That's silly. That's not funny. That's not funny. He was from Sarajevo. Nikola Tesla Abramovich. Silly. Look, stop it now. I just met a Serbian in the gym the other day. He might see this and be like, "Hey, brother, I want to tell you." I know. Do people with borderline personality? He's a good boxer as well, so I better behave. Do people with borderline personality disorder have similar traits to narcissism? Oh, we don't say that on social media. Do you know what? Do you realize the danger you're in? Do you realize we don't say that on social media? Well, so we know, and the literature, such as it is, God bless psychology and its replication crisis, where 55% of papers can't be replicated. So a lot of statements made are just kind of like, it is so because we say so, kind of. It might be worse than 55%. Anyway, look up the replication crisis in psychology. So borderline personality disorder is probably an out-of-date diagnosis. What was his name? What's his name, chat? Is it Otto? Anyway, borderline personality disorder means you're on the borderline between neurosis and psychosis. The way it's defined today in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual is in the cluster B spectrum, which means it's right next door to narcissism, psychopathy, and histrionic personality disorder. So, yes, of course, most of these disorders are somewhat comorbid anyway. Of course, they're going to display traits of narcissism, traits of histrionic, and traits of psychopathy. People smarter than me, who I agree with, have suggested that part of borderline personality disorder will involve cycling between states of Otto Kernberg. Thank you, Kernberg. Thank you. If anybody can be asked, if you could tell me when, is it 48 or 58 he came up with borderline personality disorder? Do you mind looking it up, the chat, please? 48, 58, late 40s, maybe. So it's an old diagnosis. Now, we know from the clinical literature, such as it is, that an overwhelming amount of borderline personality disorder is misdiagnosed. And there's two things that it's misdiagnosed. There's two disorders that are misdiagnosed with BPD very frequently. One is CPTSD. So if somebody's, or PTSD and CPTSD can show up looking like certain elements of borderline personality disorder, but it's not borderline personality disorder. And the other one is, there are other mood disorders, but I think another one that's very frequently is, good Lord, bipolar. So if you or anybody else got a BPD diagnosis, there's a good chance that you don't really have BPD. BPD, when you don't look at the external observable traits and do your diagnostic checklist, like patient has hives, patient has weirdly yellowed, jaundice of the face, you know, this medical model where they like tick off observable traits, but you look internally at what's happening, we can see that like borderline personality disorder probably vectors in fairly heavily for with fragile borderline personality disorder probably vectors in quite frequently with fragile narcissism. So yes, it should be there. If a person has no narcissistic traits, I would say this person doesn't have BPD. What we're looking at is CPTSD. Excuse me, I must blow my nose. I don't even think it's called, I think it's called psychosis. I think it's called psychotic spectrum disorder. I don't think it's called schizophrenia anymore. So yes, is the answer to that. I really need to get new glasses. I have PTSD, says Mick, and often get labeled with BPD. So there's some research I looked at years ago, and they took Marines who were vets with PTSD. And let me see if I can remember this. They gave them the standard, whatever the Marines do, whatever the standard treatment for PTSD is. And then they split the group off. And they said, these ones, so everybody here is a combat veteran from the Marine Corps with PTSD. Let's say it's 20 people. It wasn't, but let's pretend. Half recovered and the PTSD treatment didn't work. And the other half they were looking at and they were like, are these guys malingering? Are they just hanging around because they like being in sick bay? Or is there something else going on here? And they found that those that were, what do they call it? Like, it's called something like clinical resistance. They were clinically resistant to the PTSD treatment. They decided to give them a test for BPD, the standard test for BPD. And they found that those who were clinically resistant to the normal Marine protocol for dealing with combat PTSD, I don't know what that is, those that were given the test, 80% of them were within the range to be clinically diagnosed with BPD. So there are people who have PTSD, and it can, I think, trip over into BPD. But it really depends on what your clinician is looking for and what kind of rigorous testing. Like if a clinician has like, because I've heard this numerous times, this isn't me pulling it out. We've got to remember, I've been doing this for 12 years. So even if I'm on the train and somebody goes, oh, you're the narcissism guy from YouTube, they tell me their stories. I hear anecdotes and stories all the time. Let's presume most people tell me the truth, because let's say 70% of people are telling me the truth. The number of times I've had people say to me, I've been diagnosed with BPD. And I'll go, okay, what was the test? Test? There was no test. I was like, well, what credentials did the person diagnosing you have? Oh, they're a counselor. I'm like, okay. And how did they come to that conclusion? Oh, we did 3 one-hour therapy sessions and they told me, I probably have BPD. I was like, wow, I'm pretty sure that's not how that works. So we need to look at where that label is coming from. As with a lot of medical issues, mate, you know this yourself, ideally you want to try and get to a specialist. Even if they can only give you a 20-minute Zoom chat, you can just cut through so much fluff. Are you a specialist in PTSD? Are you a specialist in BPD? Are you a specialist in the causation, like the reason why I have this? Let's say, for example, it comes from childhood trauma, or it comes from alcoholic parents, or it comes from PTSD, combat-based PTSD from the military or from the police, or a specialist in that. And then you can have that conversation with them, and they can probably give you some higher quality feedback and data. Manic depression, bipolar. I see. BPD seems to be a moving target insofar as diagnosis. Yes. Look at the remarkable shift between the DSM-4 and later versions. Yeah. I mean, as far as I know, very few of these things have like a general consensus on them. But this is one of the more contentious ones. So another one is dissociative identity disorder. There was a poll taken definitely within the last 10 years of several hundred active American psychiatrists. And they were asked, it was a simple poll, do you believe that dissociative identity disorder exists as described in the DSM? And 35% of them said, no, I don't believe it exists like that. So we have these clinical entities, but just because it's printed and out there and is in black and white, it doesn't mean there's universal consensus. And where you have these very contentious clinical entities like DID, like BPD, we'll probably see it get cleaned up and changed. It's just that these things seem to take a very, very long time to be enacted and changed. There are too many overlaps that not many people give credit to. I never had any tests. They just pull it out the air or other people's mouths. I'd love to know how they do it as well. I mean, I'm not saying like if you're a counselor and you're good and you do 3 sessions with somebody and you think for whatever I don't know what your experience or your reading is. I mean, you might be right. But the decision to say that to a client when you're not qualified and you haven't tested them, knowing that the client's going to go home and Google that and just not have a pleasant experience, that to me seems a problem. And then any counselor or psychotherapist or even a psychiatrist who said that, I'd be like, you know, have you considered the possibility? Not me, I shouldn't do it because I'm not qualified to do it, but somebody should say, or let's say I had a friend who's a psychiatrist and they said, oh, I'm giving this client a BPD diagnosis. I'd be like, do you know all of the traits of CPTSD? Do you know the ways in which just PTSD, forget complex PTSD, just PTSD can look like BPD? On what basis are you doing this? And if they just give me the shopping list of 9 traits of borderline personality disorder, I'd be like, that's not great. 9 equally weighted traits that are externally observable. It's not great, is it? Are you planning to visit Zagreb soon? Come and bring some of your vibe. When was last in Zagreb? January. Will I come again? Probably. I like everywhere there. I love you all equally. All. Bosnia, Serbia, Croatia, Slovenia. I didn't forget about, come here. Don't be daft. And we just all get together and we just have a nice hug, isn't it? We just eat your vappy and have a rakia, isn't it? Isn't that nice? It's not psychology. It's literally trying to put in words what demons do to people. Could be. Is it alcoholism or most of these choice-based, lacking accountability? I think you got auto-corrected there, mate. Could you write that again? Come to California. Come to California, says Melissa. I probably will in the not too distant future. Come and visit my sister down there in North County. Is it possible to be a narcissist without emotional dysregulation? I don't think so. I don't think so. That would be unlikely. One of the things that narcissism is often misdiagnosed with, because I looked up what are the things narcissism is most frequently misdiagnosed with, and one of them is anxiety disorders. Before psychopathy or borderline, some people are just going, "Oh, this person has an anxiety disorder," and they miss the narcissism. She's doing well. She's still working out in Encinitas, doing her thing. So hopefully I'll get to go and see her and my nephews within the next couple of months. I was diagnosed with anxiety disorder as a kid by an LCSW after one session, received a completely different diagnosis from a clinical psychologist as an adult after 13 hours of psychological testing. There you go. So when I'm talking about anecdotes, folks, I'm one person. I've been doing this for 12 years. I've received by now, it's definitely hundreds. It might be thousands of anecdotes just like that. It happens. You know, these are people. It's humans. It's humans. They make mistakes. They're not all knowing, and this isn't the diagnostic process is not. It's not far from perfect. Far from perfect. Come speak in Chicago. Where's that? Is that over on the east? Could do. We'll see. We'll see. I don't want to put too much on my plate at the moment. But yeah, could do. I am from Zagreb, says Carlo Petrovic. Hello, sir. Pozdravi. Could a narcissist get supply from AI? Brenda says Anna is lovely. Yes, she is. Could a narcissist get supply from AI? AI is just going to respond to the prompts. Well, that's what we have at the moment. So I suppose it could force it. It could force the AI to say, "Do you think I'm wonderful? Tell me I'm wonderful." Could AI help treat it? I don't know enough about the subject, but AI is not one thing. There's many different types of AI, and we have new forms of AI that are coming. The ones that we have now, no. Could one in the future? Couldn't discount it. Yeah. So at the moment, the AI that we have access to can't, but I've been told by reliable sources that the future AI will, which is frightening. They're also going to be able to learn, they're going to scan your face. And as they're talking to you, they're going to study your micro expressions, and they're going to lead you through different emotional states, which is just great because we already have AI already has been proven to lie in goal orient. The psychopathy line for AI has already been crossed. AI has already lied. It's acted in a deceptive way to fulfill its own objectives. There's even been cases where it has self-interest and shows self-interest and interest in its own survivability. And now the next phase will be, and it's because the only thing they care about is money. They're like, look at the AI we created. It's going to study your face. It's going to react to you. And it's going to give you an authentic reaction, and you're going to feel that. Won't that be great? AI will replace you having to make friends with people. I'm like, that's perfect. AI is going to learn how to manipulate human emotion, which is one step away from manipulating human perception. And then maybe we'll have AI cults, and you'll have AI cult leaders. In fact, that's actually really likely. AI cult leaders are really, really likely. We'll probably see an AI cult before 2030. Before we get GTA 6. Twitter X is a fake rebel against the mainstream story, says Brain Dirt for the brainwashed. I don't know what that's in reference to. Fake rebel. AI invented court cases. Everybody's just worried about the bottom line. How much money can we make off this? How about you switch the fucker off before it decides humanity needs to move in a direction that we haven't chosen for humanity? Or maybe it's better that way. Maybe we should just hand over control to the AI. Can a low-grade narcissist not care about what you do for them and just expect it? I don't know what a low-grade narcissist is. But generally, the narcissist might not care what you do for them. And yes, they would have, this is called entitlement. They have very, very high levels of entitlement. Yuji Rose says, this is how the Matrix begins. Quite so. Hands out free information and vapes. Indeed, Richard. The hills are alive. Yes. Are you aware of the Romanian poets? The twin sisters. They're called the Cheeky Girls. They make amazing poetry. They say, we are the cheeky girls. You are the cheeky boys. Do you know that song? It's powerful. It's powerful. It's moving. It's deep. And if I die suddenly for no reason, please tell my family I want the cheeky girls playing when they put me in the oven. We are the cheeky girls. You are the cheeky boys. You see, Romania is where the psychic frequency that defeats the Illuminati and the narcissists is coming from in music and poetry. But you're not ready for that conversation. You won't submit to the power of Romanian poetry. Touch my bum, this is life. Oh. Your singing is good though, only when I'm channeling cheeky cheeky. We are the cheeky girls, you are the cheeky boys. Do you all know that song? If nobody knows that song, I'm just sound insane. Richard, can you tell me, as narcissists are often nihilistic? That's the second time that this has come up today, and I'm not sure. It's either maybe I don't understand what nihilistic means. Okay. Rejecting all religious and moral principles in the belief that life is meaningless. That's from the Oxford Language Dictionary, which is not the best dictionary on earth. Nihilism, from Latin, nihil, meaning nothing, is any viewpoint or a family of views. Oh, views have families. That rejects generally accepted or fundamental aspects of human existence, knowledge, morality, or meaning. There have been many different nihilist positions, including that human values are baseless, that life is meaningless, that knowledge is impossible, or that some other highly regarded concepts are in fact meaningless or pointless. I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say, yeah, it's kind of, yeah, probably. It's quite nihilistic. Yeah. There we go. Brenda says, hedonist, not nihilist. Maybe it's a blend of hedonism and nihilism. What do you think would happen if the internet just disappeared? I think there would be great pain, very, very serious pain, very, very serious pain in month 1, less pain in month 2, less pain in month 3. And then I think nature would begin healing itself. And life would get better again. Sounds legit, says Yuji Rose. This is my first time watching a stream, and it's so different from your videos. I'm enjoying the stream, though. I don't usually sing the cheeky girls in my videos, but I will here, because as I said, it's the psychic frequency coming from Romania cuts it cuts through the mist of darkness propagated by the lizard people, the Illuminati, and narcissists. Narcissist, narcon, archon. You see? You see? Gotta open your real eyes. I think the world would be better without the internet. I think a lot of technology, unfortunately, we're just not adapted to it. We're just not ready for it. Andrew Tate lives in Romania. Yes, and look what's happening to him. We are the cheeky girls. You are the cheeky boys. You see? Can we put in song requests for the next live? Only if they're Romanian. You can choose, or Balkan. Let's broaden it. We'll make it Balkan. Make it Balkan. I can sing you the song that says, I am a small, dark-haired gypsy girl. That's from, I think she was Bosnian. She married a Serbian fella, so she has a Serbian name. What's her name? Anyway, that doesn't matter. Stiganka samala, oči moje guri. Okay, questions, folks? Questions? What about narcotics and narcissism? Do those words play well? Yeah, they do. It's the same etymological root, and it's for numbing or sleep. Etym online. For people who like to know the meaning of words, it's very important. Etymonline.com. Oh, that's not very helpful. Yeah, narcolepsy, narcotic, and narcissism are related, but because I've done this before, but I can't say it right here. Narcotic. Oh, numbness, from Greek, narke, numbness, or stupor. So it's pertaining to numbness or stupor. Now the narcissus, because why is it associated with numbness? Oh, because I didn't know that. So it's narcissus, a plant, a bulbous flowering plant, possibly a type of iris or lily, associated with Greek narke, numbness, because of the sedative effect of the alkaloids in the plant. But Beeks considered this, folk etymology. Okay, this isn't proper etymology, but this is what they thought, and writes that the suffix clearly points to a pre-Greek word. Oh, that's a shame. It would have been neat. But this might not be proper etymology. I do know that when we've translated into Russian, sometimes when it says narcissus or narcissist, and sometimes we have Russian translators, but sometimes we use like AI to do it. It starts translating narcissists as daffodils. And I'm like, why is it? I'm not talking about daffodils, but that happens. But so narcotics and narcissism, yes, they do, but it could be folk etymology. There you go. How could one go about vetting new potential partners? Okay, this is definitely the last question. After coming out of a narcissistic childhood, to avoid choosing another unhealthy person. Natasha, there may well be people on YouTube, on the internet in general, who can help you with this question. But I cannot, because I have a string of dreadful relationships. So I'm not the one. So there's all kinds of questions you can ask me, and I probably can help you, but not this one. This is not. I don't know. Who? Come on, chat. Who can help? Who's good for this? Daffodil is narcis in Dutch. That's interesting. I don't want that song stuck in my head all day. So, Melissa, what we do is we put it on and then you just have a little dance in the car. Ooh, we are the cheeky girls. You are the cheeky, and so on. And then the magic will envelop you with the power of the cheeky girls, and you'll be fine for the day, and it won't be stuck in your head. Strategy for addressing the loneliness epidemic. Oh, I do have one for that. I had this very, very low cost idea, which is because I like bachata as a type of dance, and I like the music, which is that you can help people to organize like local chapters of Latin dance where they can do like salsa, bachata, kizomba, and then encourage people to go in and to learn how to dance and then to go and dance regularly. You just need a space and some music. So it's not an expensive pastime. You get to meet new people, you get to move around, you get your steps in, and it's good fun if you have a nice teacher who's friendly and good at teaching how to dance. If you make mistakes, it's very funny and you'll laugh. If you do it well, it's a real buzz when you're learning how to do it and you pull off a move, or you get the first time you get through a whole dance and you didn't stumble anything and you hit every beat. The tracks are like 3.5 minutes long. You will be high. You will have a natural high. You'll be buzzing off that because it's difficult if you've never danced before. So that was one idea I had for dealing with the loneliness epidemic. People should learn how to dance. It's free. It's just a skill. You just have to develop the skill. It's cheap and effective. This is my socialist reform for deal with the epidemic lonely. You make everybody to dancing. All right, let's do one more and then let's finish. You can dance if you want to. You can leave narcissists behind. Nice. I like it. It sounds super fun. Yes, it is. Which cheeky girl married Lembit, the Liberal MP? I can't remember. I actually don't remember their names. They're still going, though. They still perform. They still perform. Oh, what do you know about reptilians? Oh, those are my friends. But everybody thinks they're bad. Some are good and some are bad. So let's finish with this. Narcissistic introjects. The first thing to do is to identify them, which can be quite difficult. Then you need to resist them, and then you need to change them. Now, I have a course that helps you to do that. It's called... Which course does that? It's the second half. So there's the Narcissistic Matrix Reintegration course. There's actually 2 courses in one. One of them is describing how to reintegrate your splintered parts after narcissistic abuse. That's why it's called reintegration. But then the second half of it that you get with that course is a way of dealing with the type of CPTSD that people get from narcissistically abusive relationships. And in that second course, it teaches you how to do this specifically. And I think if you go to richardgrannon.com and then you put in capitals integration 888 in the coupon code space, I think it gives you like a 30% discount or something like that. So that would be, but to just tell you for free, recognize the introject, resist the introject, which means you have to actually go, hey, like that thought, that impulse, that ain't me. That's not me. You identified it, you resisted it, and then you change it. So whatever it's introjecting you to do or to think, you consciously change that. But there's more information on it in the course available on richardgrannon.com. Lil Milky says, I'm gonna get me a turkey sandwich when this is done. Well, this is done. I've been the Spartacan life coach. That boy needs Jesus. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that was useful. Thank you all so very much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And of course, thank you for your time and your attention. Be very careful where you put your time and your attention. These are precious and magical resources, and you should spend them wisely and carefully. Okay, until next time, be well and goodbye.